Thank you for joining me on this journey through the 177 nations of Tasmania. In this episode, I'm talking with Jeff from Canada. Now, Canada is one of those countries which is often considered one of the most similar to Australia in terms of history, culture, society, and so on. And there are definitely parallels between our two countries, but also some key differences. Now, Jeff is a proud Canadian, but he also loves his newfound home in Launceston, where he settled with his family. And as you will hear, he's picked up on a few rather Tasmanian quirks and peculiarities, let's say, that I'm sure locals and migrants alike will both recognise and relate to. So without further ado, let's jump in and find out more about what a Canadian's experience of Tasmania is like and more.
So I grew up in Toronto, a suburb of Toronto, North York, I guess, which is now part of the megacity of Toronto. Grew up in a upper middle class area, public school kid, and always loved that. I mean, I had a great upbringing. I guess, like most kids, walking to school was fun. Walking, my primary school, I guess we had middle school there. We have a sort of 7, 8, 9. Yep. But walking to high school was great too. You're in Toronto too, so it's the better part of a 5 million person city. I mean, if you wanted to go anywhere, it was very normal. This is what I lament as a parent now, that it was normal to, you've got to go to the dentist, jump on the bus, jump on the subway, take yourself downtown. And if I'm not there, jump on the bus, jump on the subway and get home. And that was utterly normal. I can remember being 10 years old and my parents letting me and 3 little friends of mine skip school on the first day of the Toronto Blue Jays baseball season and go down to the stadium, buy tickets, watch the game, and that meant 2 subways and a streetcar to get there and transferring. And, we're 4 10-year-old boys in a city of 3.5 million at the time. And I don't know that parents would do that nowadays. That was a bit more free. But yeah, so grew up in a big city, but with a good community. And ball hockey was the everyday after school thing on the street, and driveway hockey. And then I was more of a skier in the winter, so I would take to snow skiing in the winter as much as I could. And then my biggest memory and my biggest fondness growing up was an American or Canadian style summer camp. So a sleepover camp. And just before COVID hit, my wife and I were having meetings about to start to get funding and look at investors for starting a summer camp in Tassie. It didn't happen because of COVID. We thought, who's going to invest in a business that gets small kids together in closed spaces now? It's completely uncertain. But our thought was, what do parents do with teenage kids during the summer? What do they get up to? And we watched our kids wanting to do whatever the neighbors wanted to do too. I mean, we would offer them, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to do this? And you just get, no. And the neighbors ring the door. Hey guys, you want to come out and play? Boom, they're gone. And they just want to be around other kids. They just want to do kid stuff, programs for kids. And that was the best part of being a youngster in Canada, was going off to summer camp. Because it didn't matter whether we were playing tennis or doing archery or doing swimming or canoeing or kayaking or whatever. You were with your friends. You were with kids. And I guess the concept to Australians is a foreign one, that you're going to send your kids away for a month or 2 and they're going to be looked after by another 18-year-old kid who's may or may not be sober at night, and that's going to be an acceptable thing for your kids. But I tell you what, it's my favorite part of my upbringing, my favorite part of youth. I mean, that's where you learn to snog girls. That's where you learn to get along with other people. It's where you learn a bit of independence. Yeah, it's where you learn no one else is going to clean up the cabin for you. You better clean up because everyone else is cleaning up. So my parents loved it. They got rid of us for the summer, and they had their whole lives back for a few months a year. And it would be an absolute win to start one here, but maybe next year we'll put that on the back burner.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, a lot of parents sort of struggle with what to do in the summer holidays.
I just thought of what is a 15-year-old, I have 2 daughters, so what is a 15-year-old girl going to do? What's a 16-year-old girl going to do? They're going to go downtown and try and spend money that they don't have because it's hard to find work. Let's face it, it's not every 15-year-old can find a job. There's just not that much. And what would they prefer to do? I mean, So the ideas of sitting at home and fooling around with your boyfriend or girlfriend while mom and dad are at work were just not appealing to me. I thought, geez, we're going to end up with a teenage pregnant kid that way. And I want my kids to have a better experience than working at Macca's or working some job that wasn't really fun. I wanted them to have a lot of fun and remember it as summer breaks were the best time of their life.
Yeah.
Not just something to count down the days until you went back to school.
Canada, our home and native land.
We ended up in Launceston by way of Hobart, actually. So I guess we ended up in Australia because I met an Australian, a West Australian, while I was training in Canada. After 10 years or so in WA, I couldn't stand the heat. I couldn't stand spending all my summertime indoors because I was avoiding doing anything with the kids outside or playing golf or going camping or anything I liked. Just didn't want it to be over 40. And I basically said Melbourne or south of Melbourne. And we took a year, sort of hemmed and hawed, and decided, no, Hobart would be more cost effective, even though we sort of liked Lonnie more, but Hobart would have more things to offer. And we settled in Hobart 6.5 years ago. Lived there for the better part of 4 years. And then at some point I started working up north. I was doing locums in Devonport and Launceston, and then found that was too hard on the family, being, half the week there and half the week gone. It wasn't really enjoyable, so we worked on a compromise, and that was move up here. And I love it. And I think my wife was a little more reticent. She's West Australian, but she was a little reserved on moving up to Launceston, but has loved it too, and even remarked, last week was Canada Day, so July 1st, and we had about 20 people over here, and just other Canadians got together, and we were talking about where is home, and she says, it's really been a great idea moving here. She feels connected to a lot of people. She's made a lot of friends. One of my other Canadian friends was saying, and we both agreed that when we reference home, that's still Canada, but we don't ever plan on leaving here. Think we'll leave Launceston or Launceston area at least for forever, but we'll always still reference Canada as home.
Canada, our home and native land.
So I'm trained as a GP, but I do skin cancer medicine only. I had been doing general practice work for about 10, 12 years, a lot in WA, a few years in Toronto where I grew up, and I'd had a melanoma myself.
Okay.
My dad's had stage 4 melanoma. My aunt's had a melanoma. It just became more personally relevant to work in a field that I enjoyed and that meant something to me. Not that medicine in general didn't. It just, I think I was losing the luster for treating people's blood pressure and cholesterol issues. And you can take your work home with you a lot if you're that sort of person and if it's heavy work. And I felt passionate about skin cancer, and I felt like it was obviously relevant to us, and it gives me a little bit of tactical skills too, or technical skills, so I do get to do some surgery, and I find it a lot more lighthearted. I also find I'm the sort of person who likes knowing a certain subject area really well, rather than feeling consistently out of my depth in a breadth of knowledge, yes, but not really a depth of it. So when we left WA to move to Tassie to be doing skin cancer medicine, people thought we were mad. You're going to Tassie to do skin cancer? It's freezing down there. And I said, yes, but it's the second highest incidence behind Queensland of melanoma per capita. And, it's
very high UV.
Very high UV.
Yeah.
Large population, especially up in the north, a large population or in the catchment area of people who work outdoors.
Yeah, right.
So there's a farm in every direction here.
Yeah.
And close by, so there's a lot of outdoor work, and sadly, that's good for business, or gladly, that's good for business. And I love what I do. I absolutely didn't love what I did as a GP, but I absolutely love it now. And
I mean, Australia generally, I think, has one of the highest rates of skin cancer, if not the highest in the world.
It does, yeah. So Australia's quite. Yeah, pretty much the world capital for skin cancers. Queensland, just based on the outdoors lifestyle and the sheer heat and lack of clothing up there. There's a lot more people. But we're always sort of, us and WA, second or third for melanoma per capita. And that was a bit surprising to me because I would have thought Sydney and an outdoors lifestyle in New South Wales would have been higher on the list. But look, it's been an absolute joy to move to Tasmania and also find that work was pretty efficient.
Canada, our home and native land.
Had it been always your ambition to study medicine? Was that your first choice?
Yes and no. I mean, I guess I was always good at science and wanted to figure out what I would do with that. But when I started university, I wanted to be Prime Minister of Canada. And I realized pretty early that my first year politics class wasn't as interesting as I was hoping, and that I would have to be fluent in French. And my French is passable-ish, but it's not fluent. And I guess I could have taken a lot of French classes and put a lot of effort in, and I just didn't see wanting to do it. And I still have a passion for politics, but everyone I talk to who is in politics tells me, no, you're not going to do politics. And I ask them why, and they tell me because I have a soul. and say, look, you need to be pretty ruthless and a game player, and you're just a nice, honest person, and those people get chewed up and spat out in politics.
But in a way, that's half the problem, isn't it? It attracts all the worst people, and the people who would be good kind of shy away.
Yeah, I don't want to give my life to that. I didn't want to give my life to any job, really. I still wanted to retain who I am and the things I enjoy. And when my work defined me, it was going to be a problem for me. So politics was going to be too much that changed who I was and changed how I had to be in myself and in my daily routines to keep going with it. I didn't want to do that.
I actually studied Canadian politics at university, funnily enough.
Cool.
So I can ask you a little bit about that, because one of the themes that I remember or has come up was the similarity between Australia and Canada. I mean, on many levels. Have you found many noticeable similarities?
Yes, I found similarities. I do find some differences too, but I'm sure we'll get to that. I think people in both countries are, by and large, good-hearted, good-natured, want to help. They tell me there's a tall poppy syndrome here, which, okay, yeah, at times I can see it, but I think maybe it's overblown. I think Australians want to be proud of Australians and want to see them do well on the world stage, just like Canadians do. We're vastly patriotic, but you can do that without being completely bombastic like the U.S. can be. Yeah. Which, no slight against the U.S. I mean, I think a lot of people feel that Canadians hate Americans. That I think it's overblown. I mean, we like to set aside.
It seems you want to have your own separate identity. Canadians are at pains to differentiate themselves. That's
the wearing of the Canadian flag when you go traveling in Europe. And
I've met Canadian when I've been backpacking around Europe and Canadians, and they kind of joked that they had it on their backpack so in case they were ever in a kidnapping situation.
Look, I did it my first trip to Europe because you were told that's what you do and you differentiate yourselves from Americans. And then I never did it again because I met some wonderful Americans, and I have really good friends who are American. And look, I'll say there can be dickheads from everywhere.
That's fair.
There are dickhead Australians, there are dickhead Canadians, but it's not representative. And I was asked by some of my American friends, why do you have a flag? Or why do some Canadians have a flag? And it was embarrassing to say, well, just so that we're not you. And that was wrong. So
I feel you need a stronger reason, don't you?
You really do.
It's a nice flag, really. That's what I'd say.
Well, it is, although
it's very recognizable.
It's very recognizable. It's easy to spot. I've been made fun of that we go carrying a giant leaf into battle. It's not exactly going to scare anyone, but look, it's distinct. It's unique. I like that, getting back to the similarities, there's certainly an effort to try and make the next generation better off than the generation before. I think, that as a parent, who's coming close to middle age, that's becoming increasingly obvious that may not happen in this generation, both in Canada and here. And that kids will struggle to have home ownership, that they'll struggle to have employment possibilities that are as good as they were my parents' generation.
Yeah.
Coming out of their training or school. So I do see the future in both countries as a bit clouded, but I see that globally. I think we're in a wonderful spot, especially in Tasmania. So the similarities between Tasmanians or Tasmania and Canada is, primarily it's outdoor beauty. I mean, we're here because I like temperate culture. I like being outside. I like being able to go for a hike. I like green. I could not stand the color of summer in WA because it was yellow and brown.
Yeah.
And
there's not a lot of grass around that I remember. And
no.
The grass that I saw was kind of
dusty,
artificial. And you could see the sand coming through.
Yeah. My wife had always thought, before she moved to Canada, that Australia has the best beef in the world. This is amazing. We've got so much beef. And she went to Canada and she ate, Albertan beef, and she went, have I got this wrong? And I said, yeah. In Canada, we graze off of green grass that are, nutrient-rich soil, green grass. Well, what do you think the beef's going to taste like? And where you graze in Queensland off dry, dusty scrub, and in WA the same, look at the beef from the northwest here. It's fantastic soil. It's fantastic grass. Yeah, the food in Tassie tastes great because you're growing it right. You're growing it off of proper soil. You're growing it with a decent amount of water. And we're lucky, absolutely lucky this way.
Yeah.
So part of that appeals to someone who is looking for a home away from home. As I said, I'll probably always refer to Canada as home, but I loved my home. I loved Canada. I do still. And I wanted to find the closest thing apart from Canada, in Australia. And that's here for sure. It doesn't have as many people, but that can be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that my commute to work is 5 minutes. I love the traffic reports here because it cracked me up. There's just no such thing as traffic compared to a Sydney, Melbourne, Toronto. I mean, I find it comical. It's great. The Launceston-Hobart rivalry always cracks me up, whether it's based on beer or whether it's based on a footy team or,
Yeah, I think people from outside find that very strange.
I find it hysterical because I just think, look, if there was ever a war, we'd be on the same side no matter what. Well, why the argument? So,
I mean, I'm probably biased coming from Hobart, but it often seems that people in Launceston take that more seriously than Hobartians. But I'm not from Hobart originally either, so...
No, do you know what? I think you're right about that. I also, in talking with my wife this morning about this upcoming interview, I think that's maybe what appeals to Canadians, or at least to myself, about Launceston, in that we've grown up in Canada with a big brother to the south that dominates us culturally, economically, whatnot, sporting, music, whatever. And so there's almost that ethos in Canada that you have to be more congenial, more funny, more accepting, more tolerant, more willing to please than the big brother to the south that can just dominate. And I think that's that underlying tone I felt in Launceston more than in Hobart. We're not as big. We don't have as many things, but boy, we're willing to roll up our sleeves and smile and help you out with something. Maybe that's oversimplifying it, but there's certainly a warmth and an openness to people here that, maybe is that inferiority complex, or it just feels more natural for me up here.
Canada, our home and native land.
Did you meet your wife in Canada? Did I get that right?
Yes, sort of, yes.
Sort of.
So my wife, she's West Australian, as I said. She'd come over to do a ski season, not at Whistler, but she did a ski season. We met on a flight from Vancouver down to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and had been going down to meet a girlfriend from LA, just for a bit of a holiday before she went home. And I was desperately needing a break from 100-hour weeks in residency, and an opportunity came up to have a holiday in Mexico. So we met on the plane briefly. Well, we met going through Mexican customs, we like to say.
Right. That's a great meetup story.
It is. It was actually hysterical because I think she was behind me in the queue, and Mexican, or at least Puerto Vallarta customs, had this system where you press a button, and if it goes green, go on through. If it goes red, they're going to search you. And we just smiled and laughed at it and went through. We both went green. And then she said to me, well, do you mind watching my bag while I go to the washroom? And I said, yeah, that's fine. Figuring if she's already smuggled in drugs, that's fine. We're already in. So, I since over the years found out that anytime she gets off an airplane, she needs to go pee immediately. So,
Really?
yeah. So, the rest was history. We shared a taxi and met up and got to know each other as friends. And then, I guess started dating a few weeks later when she was back in Vancouver after her family had come for a visit. And they toured around the western part of Canada for a while. And then, we started dating. She actually went off to England for 4 months. So we had a relationship that started as friends. We got to know each other via email and some occasional phone calls and realized this could probably work if we were ever in the same town. So she moved back to Vancouver because I still had training to finish, and she just moved right in. So I like to say we had one night, and then she moved in with the backup plan. Well, if this isn't working, you go back to Australia, and if it is working, stick around.
She stuck around.
Yeah, it's been 18 years.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
That's pretty good effort. So how long then were you in Canada before you came to Australia?
Well, I mean, I was in Canada all my life, but I'd been to Australia. I'd backpacked around Australia as a medical student for about 3 months. And then my wife and I lived together. Well, she was my girlfriend then. We lived together for about a year in Vancouver. And then as soon as I finished training, her work visa was done. So we moved to WA. And then spent the better part of 10 years in WA, going back to Canada when my dad wasn't well for a few years. And then, after 10 years there, made the decision to shift somewhere cooler, both temperature-wise and culturally cooler.
Yeah.
I like it here.
Yeah. So at what point did you decide your life was going to be in Australia?
Long story short, when we moved back to WA in 2012, I thought I was pretty much done with medicine. I didn't want to be a GP anymore. The effort was, we'll take a rural posting, we'll save up money while the kids are young, because I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll go back to uni, maybe I'll do politics, maybe I'll write books, but I can't see myself being a GP in 20 years. So it was an effort to just bank up some savings, make a nest egg so that if the money was lean for a few more years, that was fine. And I found I loved doing skin cancer. So I had a day a week that I would just do skin cancer in this clinic in WA and in Southwest. And it really worked for me, both appealing from a personal perspective and what I got to do. And so I started doing more and more courses in it, and that was it. And then we realized I can't do it in Canada. In order to do it in Canada, one, the incidences are much lower.
Yeah.
Two, there's not an outpatient skin cancer field. You'd have to go retrain as a dermatologist. And I didn't see being 40 and wanting to retrain in anything anymore. It was one thing at 30-ish, but at 40-ish was a little taxing. And then also, I don't think I wanted to lose doing skin cancer. I didn't want to treat primarily acne and other skin conditions. I wanted to do cancer, where I got to do a little more surgery. And oddly, the field of dermatology in Canada is not really well supported financially and professionally. It's becoming. It used to be a very lucrative, very well paid, very exciting field. Well, for the doctor, 25, 30 years ago, and isn't anymore. They're struggling, and so the appeal of doing that wasn't there. And I realized we're going to stay in Australia. Now, where do we want to raise our kids? Where do we really want to live? I didn't want to live in WA. Based on the heat and what we value. The WA economy seemed to be based on a model of, well, dig it up and ship it off to China and make nothing locally. And just, I saw guys with 8th grade educations making $300,000 a year and living life large, and teachers and nurses and people who were looking after society struggling to afford a house, struggling to, give their kids a good start. And I didn't like that value system.
Yeah.
Plus, I like the weather here better.
Canada, our home and native land.
Here, biggest difference for me is the I don't know how to phrase it. I guess the insistence upon an education. So you don't go very far in Canada without post-secondary degree, without, and not just a BA. You got to do a master's. You got to do a professional degree. You're not going to get a job fresh out of high school. Being a builder just pays a lot here, and it just doesn't pay the bills there.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you can get by, but you're not going to be well off. And I think builders in Australia are well off. Not just Tassie. We saw it in WA, and the mining contingent who would, fly up with their 8th grade education and hold a few drills here and there. They were well off. They're in the upper 10%, and you don't have a manual job in Canada and exist in the upper 50% of income earners.
Yeah,
you just don't. So yeah, that striving for higher education, striving for academic excellence, need for education, need to excel at school. That's where I see it as a parent, that my kids, the academic standards by which my sister's kids are judged at school and by which my kids are being judged at school, I think is sizable, the difference. I think the expectations for boys and girls in Canada is that, you're not going to accept middle of the road. It's not to be strived for. Whereas here, it's just get through, and you can do a lot.
I think that's very much
with
Tasmanian mentality as well.
Yeah, don't stand out. Maybe that's the tall poppy. I went to a public high school, as I said. It was a big school, about 1,600 kids, and we had 440, I think, in our graduating class, and 4 weren't going to university.
Yeah, right.
So that was the kind of, and that's a public school. That's the ethos there is.
So
that was high school. You celebrate it, but they have leavers dues everywhere around Australia. It's a massive thing where kids go to Queensland or they go to Bali or they go to, and they party like they've just won the Super Bowl. And I kind of look at it like, well, you've done what was minimally expected of you. Now celebrate it, because great, but there's much more to life than just finishing high school. If you don't have a plan, why are you going to use this as the pinnacle of your achievement in life?
So you'd say then that academic achievement is more valued in Canada generally?
Yeah, I think it's a necessity. It's probably valued. I'm selling it out, and I guess I'm stereotyping, which I don't like doing, but there are amazingly bright people in Tasmania, and there are amazingly ambitious people in Tasmania and in Australia in general. But I think the need for academic achievement isn't there, because you can get by with middle of the road. You can be quite successful here as a builder, as someone who works for themselves in any number of fields. You'd have to be so damn lucky in Canada to be Bill Gates, to
right.
drop out and make billions.
Yeah.
Canada, home and native land.
Tasmania is, I guess, largely regarded as a haves-not state. We're last in economics. We're last in education outcomes, teen pregnancy, state growth. Us in northern territories.
And it's been that way for decades.
Yeah.
We have the odd moment of things go up for a bit, but I think
as most government measurables, we're dragging. And obviously right now we're kicking goals. I think our Premier's done a great job managing COVID. I think we're seen by others in the mainland as, wow, this is a place where you can not have to lock down, or because of their island nature, you can control spread. We're all working from home in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, wherever. So if you're going to live from home, why not live from home 20 minutes out of Launceston, where you can have several acres of land and just, have a nice natural lifestyle? Why fight the traffic in Melbourne all the time? So the appeal, and obviously we're seeing that in house prices going up, and we're seeing that in 30,000 people moving to Tasmania a year now. We're different now. So the COVID has brought, obviously, a great success for how we've managed the situation, a success for our view amongst the rest of Australians, I think. But as I said, we're also historically a haves-not place.
Yeah.
And if we're going to stay resistant to opening are opening our minds to other people's ideas, to what happens in Sydney, to what they do in New Zealand, to what they do elsewhere, we're going to stay a haves-not state. You know, if you don't want to hear how they do things elsewhere, you're really not going to affect that change for your future generations. And so I hope that this brings in fresh blood from mainland and from abroad. I hope that it also increases the awareness that as great as we're managing it, there's always ideas that we can open our minds and our hearts to how we can do it more efficient and better and more capable for all.
Canada, our home and native land.
That's another thing that always spins me out. Men walking around in Tassie in shorts. And sometimes in flip-flops, and I just kind of go, don't tell me you don't feel the cold in your legs. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. You've got a beanie on, you've got a jumper and a hoodie and a jacket on, and you're in shorts. You look like an idiot.
You've hit on the classic Tasmanian, winter identity, I suppose. That's
my
how
legs
you
don't
pick 'em.
feel the cold. Yes, they do. The rest of you is going to shiver.
I was at school with a guy. He wore shorts every day of the year.
I've asked some of the staff at the private schools here, because all the boys at the private schools, they wear their knee-high socks and their shorts in winter, and they look so silly. I mean, it's absurd. And I think, why don't they wear pants? Is it part of the school uniform? And they say, look, we offer pants, but you're considered a loser or a nerd if you're wearing pants. All the cool kids are wearing shorts, and I'm going,
really?
That's just absurd. You dress for the job that you want, right? That's an old expression. Dress for the job you want. Nobody dresses like that if you're looking for a job as an architect or as a lawyer or as a school teacher you don't dress in shorts
Not in
and knee-high
Tasmania.
socks.
I know in like Queensland, the police wear shorts and certain professions, but I've not in Tasmania.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, it spins me out. It always will. I know that I'll say it as often as I have to, but I'm not going to affect any change, and I know that.
Oh, like I said, that's been a characteristic of Tasmanians for decades, I'd say, and I think it's just become part of the part of the identity. Yeah, I was going to ask you about the Canadian winter, because I've interviewed a few people from northern countries and talked about the culture in winter, and I was wondering whether Canada might be the same, given that you have pretty cold winters.
Yeah, I do miss it. I miss having a reason to wear a jacket a lot. I mean, we do wear jackets here, but it's not. You have your winter clothes and your summer clothes, or different seasons. Winter always meant skiing to me, though. So winter growing up was always, well, that's great. We can go for a ski. We can go play. In Vancouver especially, it was, if it's raining in the city, it's snowing in the mountains, let's just go. So there was always something to look forward to in leisure time there. Now, being in a big city when it's snowing in winter is miserable. It's often slushy and windy and really just unappealing. So I don't miss most of winter. I do miss skiing. I do miss I miss the occasional snowball fight with the kids, and we had a snow day in Launceston last August. It snowed up here, and it was great. I forgot about it because the kids woke me at 6 a.m. saying, Dad, it's snowing. Let's go play. And I was, don't wake me. I've seen enough snow. And then I realized this was special and unique and should get out there. And yeah, it was lovely. And all the kids in the neighborhood just built snowmen and threw snowballs around, and no one was in a hurry to get them off to school. And they had a great time. And then we took them tobogganing, went to Ben Lomond for a little tobogganing and a little bit of, we didn't. I think we left the skis in the car. It wasn't that much snow. But I do want to get my kids onto skis. It was a big part of me. And our hope was always, get them started at Ben Lomond and then go to Japan and go to New Zealand. And, maybe one day the travel will be more free. Right now it's looking like that's a long way off. But
New Zealand, you got a good chance with New Zealand. Yeah.
We definitely thought about it this winter. Mostly didn't want to take the risk that, as has happened now, snap outbreak and a travel bubble closes, and I could get stuck in New Zealand for weeks and weeks. And okay, there's worse places to get stuck, but if I've got 3 months of patience waiting for me to get back, it makes me feel uncomfortable. So that'll wait another year, I think. Likewise, having family abroad. The most difficult thing, it always felt far having my parents in Toronto, but now it's extremely far. Now it's there's oceans in between, and they're always, I guess literally were, but we missed their 50th anniversary last year. But everyone did. I mean, so they couldn't go out, so we did it all by Zoom. But it would have been nice to be there as we'd planned. We haven't seen them. Usually we see them at least once a year, sometimes twice a year. But it's been 18 months, and I think they're very much, talked to them this morning, and they're hoping for a travel bubble for vaccinated travelers by December. And I'm hopeful for that. I really am, but I try not to get their hopes up because I don't see that as likely. And it's really depressing. It's depressing for the kids because you want your kids to be involved in their grandparents' lives and vice versa. It's much more important for my parents and for our kids than it is for us. And so this has been difficult because I can see it hurting my dad. I can see it hurting that they can't give their grandkids a hug. And they're missing out. And so are my kids. But it's the life we chose. It's I wouldn't choose otherwise, even if I'd known this was going to come. I probably would have invested in a company called Zoom.
Yeah, indeed.
But if I'd known this was going to happen, no, we'd still live here. We're in the best place in the world. Us in New Zealand where else would you want to live?
Canada, our home and native land. True patriot love in all thy sons command.
Thank you for listening to another episode of 177 Nations of Tasmania. Don't forget you can also follow us on Spotify, Facebook and Twitter. Just look up 177 Nations of Tasmania. And thank you again for listening.